The air was thick with the scent of aged mahogany and old money. For 100 years, Bellwood Academy has been a monument to tradition and prestige. And tonight, under the glow of its Centennial Gala, the illusion of perfection was absolute. But beneath the glimmer of 1,000 lights, a dark history was about to claim its latest victim. When the arrogant, powerful Elias Thorne IV took a final poisoned sip of tea in the hallowed founder's study, the celebration instantly shattered. It turned into a meticulous, maddening crime scene. Now, Dr. Penelope Carter and Detective Donovan must navigate the Academy's secretive staff, the desperate headmaster, the distraught librarian, the volatile professor. Everyone has a motive. The only clue is a tiny, cryptic pin shaped like the most deadly of flowers. Can you solve the puzzle before they do? The case of death in the founder's study begins now. Chapter 1. The air inside Bellwood Academy's grand hall was thick with the scent of aged parchment, polished mahogany, and the crisp, distant smell of October wood smoke wafting in from Hemlock Falls. Dr. Penelope, Penny Carter, newly arrived and freshly appointed as the Assistant Director of Archives, adjusted the lapels of her borrowed velvet jacket, feeling acutely aware of the weight of history and the weight of expectation on her shoulders. Tonight was the Centennial Gala, the grand celebration of the Academy's 100th year, and the atmosphere was less celebratory and more suffocatingly formal. Bellwood was a Gothic masterpiece, all soaring ceilings, stained glass crests, and leaded windows that hinted at secrets held close. Penny loved it, every dusty, atmospheric inch of it. But tonight, the polished veneer felt brittle. She caught the eye of Detective Miles Donovan, the local police liaison, leaning against a marble column. He was a handsome man with the weary patience of someone who usually dealt with lost cats and stolen garden gnomes, not elite school drama. He offered a polite, non-committal nod. Penny, who harbored a not-so-secret passion for true crime podcasts and classic British mysteries, felt a ridiculous, childish thrill at the potential for something interesting to happen. Be careful what you wish for, Penny. The source of the evening's tension wasn't the champagne shortage or the uncomfortable speeches. It was Elias Thorne IV. As chairman of the board and great-grandson of the founder, Elias was Bellwood, and tonight he was delivering an hour-long, self-aggrandizing lecture on the Thorne legacy, pausing frequently to glare at members of the faculty. He was a man whose charm had curdled into arrogance years ago, and his presence cast a shadow over the entire room. "Is it just me?" whispered Sarah Jenkins, the perpetually stressed head of admissions, tugging Penny's sleeve. "Does Elias look positively venomous tonight? He cornered Headmaster Sterling near the punch bowl 10 minutes ago and was practically vibrating with fury." Penny glanced at Headmaster Alistair Sterling, a tall, impeccably dressed man whose usual cool composure seemed to have cracked, leaving behind a nervous sheen on his brow. Sterling looked like a man balancing a priceless vase on his head while simultaneously juggling flaming torches. "He seems stressed," Penny murmured, watching Sterling conspicuously avoid Elias's line of sight by speaking with an elderly donor. "Stressed? He's terrified," Sarah hissed, leaning closer. "The rumor is the endowment isn't as healthy as Elias claims. Alistair was pushing for a capital campaign. Elias wanted to sell the Northwoods parcel.
They clashed publicly in the board meeting last week. Elias threatened Alastair's job and pension. This was the cozy drama Penny had been looking for. Not too dark, just the right mix of institutional intrigue and personal stakes. She scanned the room, cataloging the other key players. There was Fiona Shaw, the school's brilliant, icy CFO. Fiona, dressed in a sharp black gown, looked like she could calculate the exact cost of everyone's silence. She was engaged in a terse, low-voiced conversation with Professor Julian Vance, the eccentric art history chair, a man known for his dramatic flair and his volatile temper. Vance was waving his hands emphatically, his face flushed. Penny realized everyone present had a reason to resent Elias Thorne. He treated the faculty like expensive, irritating furniture, managing every aspect of the school from curriculum to cleaning staff with an iron, arrogant fist. Around 10:30 p.m., the atmosphere reached peak awkwardness. Elias Thorne, having finished his speech and consumed 3 glasses of expensive scotch, announced he needed to retrieve a crucial Centennial document from the founder's study, a remote, oak-paneled room rarely used outside of official board meetings. He offered a sickly sweet smile, saying he'd return to graciously accept any further praise. The moment he left, the hall seemed to exhale. Headmaster Sterling immediately drained his glass. Fiona Shaw pulled out her phone and started typing furiously, her expression unreadable. Professor Vance retreated to a corner, sketching rapidly in a small notebook, ignoring his surroundings. The brief respite was shattered 15 minutes later by a blood-curdling scream echoing from the second floor. It was Mrs. Eleanor Higgins, the school's diminutive, octogenarian librarian, her voice usually the sound of a moth's wings, now sharp as broken glass. Penny's heart hammered a rhythm against her ribs. This wasn't a lost cat. This was the opening scene. Detective Donovan, already halfway across the hall, met Penny's gaze. In his eyes, the weariness was replaced by focused, professional annoyance. Penny knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that the game had just begun. She subtly followed the detective up the grand, curving staircase, her mind already racing through the possible motives: finance, pride, and the long, slow burn of institutional revenge. The air in the stairwell grew colder as they ascended toward the founder's study, the scent of expensive cigars and death now mixing in the cool night air. Penny took a deep breath, preparing to step into a real-life mystery far more complex than any archived letter.
Chapter 2. The founder's study was an oppressive room, designed to inspire awe and compliance, not comfort. The only light came from a single, ornate desk lamp and the flicker of a few remaining fireplace coals. Elias Thorne IV lay sprawled across the Persian rug, his bespoke tuxedo slightly rumpled, his face a ghastly shade of gray against the dark wood floor. The official Centennial document, a century-old leather-bound deed, was clutched loosely in his hand. Mrs. Higgins, the librarian, was hysterical, clinging to the headmaster's arm, repeating, "The tea, the special tea. He always insisted on it." Detective Donovan established control quickly. "Dr. Carter, please secure the door and ensure no one enters or leaves the hall downstairs. Headmaster, get Mrs. Higgins a chair and call the EMTs, though I suspect it's too late." Penny followed the detective's instructions, her literary training kicking in, cataloging details, no sign of struggle, no overturned furniture, the faint, bitter almond scent that often accompanies certain poisons, and a delicate porcelain teacup resting on the corner of the heavy oak desk. "Tea," Donovan muttered, kneeling beside the body, careful not to disturb anything. She mentioned tea. Did anyone else know he was coming up here? Headmaster Sterling, regaining a semblance of control, managed to stammer, "Only those of us who knew he was retrieving the document. He always drinks a special blend, a rare oolong, which Mrs. Higgins personally brews for him only on Centennial or board nights. It's part of the tradition." Sterling's face was pale, his eyes darting to the teacup and then back to the floor. "And who prepared this special blend tonight?" Donovan pressed, his voice low and authoritative. "Mrs. Higgins, of course. She's meticulous about it. She even brings her own ancient silver teapot." Penny, securing the study door, noted the position of the body again. Elias's hand wasn't just holding the document, it was positioned as if he was trying to point at something on the heavy, leather-topped desk before he collapsed. Her eyes traced the line of his outstretched fingers, landing on a small, heavy silver letter opener lying near the inkwell. It looked untouched, ruling out a stabbing, but her gaze drifted past the opener to a half-finished book resting open face down. It was an obscure 19th century history of local botany, seemingly out of place among the financial ledgers and legal texts. "Detective," Penny said, pointing discreetly toward the book. "That book. It doesn't look like it belongs with the rest of his reading material." Donovan squinted at the cover, his initial skepticism of the civilian sleuth melting slightly under the pressure of the moment. Noted. "Mrs. Higgins, can you tell me what happened, slowly, please?" Mrs. Higgins, sipping water, her breathing still ragged, whispered, "He called me, Detective. Called my private line from his study. He sounded agitated. Said he needed his tea immediately, right after he finished his speech. I prepared it, just as I always do. I brought it up here, knocked, and he told me to leave it on the hall table and go. Said he didn't want to be disturbed. But I forgot my reading glasses in the service pantry. I came back just a moment ago to ask if anyone had seen them. I saw the study door ajar, and when I looked in, oh, that poor man." Donovan's gaze sharpened. "So, you prepared the tea, left it outside the door, and then left?" "Yes. No one else was on the second floor when I left, but when I came back just now, the door was slightly open, and the teacup was here." She gestured faintly. "To the desk." Penny immediately saw the flaw in the narrative. If Mrs. Higgins left the tea outside the door, someone else must have let Elias Thorne in, poured the cup, and administered the poison. The killer was in the room between the time Elias arrived and Mrs. Higgins returned. Or the killer was Mrs. Higgins herself, lying about the precise sequence of events. Donovan looked at Penny, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. "Dr. Carter, I need a list of everyone who was upstairs or even near this area in the past 30 minutes, and a complete itinerary of Mr. Thorne's movements since 10 p.m. Penny, pulling out her small notebook, a gift from her sister for impromptu archival emergencies, felt the thrill again. The tea, the document, the cryptic book. The stage was set, and every staff member below them now had the distinct profile of a suspect. The Centennial celebration had just turned into the first act of a classic Whodunit, and Penny had a front row seat. She just had to figure out who brewed the deadliest cup. The next morning, the Bellwood Academy campus was shrouded in a heavy, humid silence, the kind that precedes a major scandal. The press, held back by police tape, clustered at the wrought iron gates, their flashbulbs occasionally flickering against the historic stone walls. Detective Donovan had sealed the founder's study and moved the official interviews to the school's administrative annex. Penny, having been designated the official staff liaison, a role Donovan had reluctantly granted her after seeing her keen observational skills, found herself with unparalleled access to the suspects and the archives. The preliminary autopsy report confirmed the bitter almond scent. Cyanide, a fast-acting, professional-grade poison suggesting deliberate, calculated murder, not a desperate crime of passion. The poison had been administered via the teacup, confirming the tea ritual was the key vector.
Penny's first task, once she secured Mrs. Higgins' antique oolong canister and teapot for the police, was to track down the history of the obscure book found near the body, Local Botanicals and the Poisons of New England, 1888 edition. She found the matching archival record in the library system. The book had been checked out exactly 3 times in the last 20 years. One was a history professor who retired last year. The other 2 were within the past month. The first recent borrower? Fiona Shaw, the CFO. The second, a week later, Professor Julian Vance, the art history chair. This detail felt explosive, but Penny knew better than to jump to conclusions. She logged the information and prepared for the headmaster's interview. Headmaster Alistair Sterling was first. He looked worse than the night before, his crisp shirt collar slightly askew, a telltale sign of deep distress. "Alistair, let's talk about the finances," Donovan began, leaning forward across the conference table. Sterling sighed, running a hand over his face. "It's what I feared. The press is already sniffing around. Elias was meticulous about secrecy. He wanted the Centennial to be a triumphant display of old money and stability. The truth is, we're not stable." Penny interjected. "Sarah Jenkins mentioned a conflict regarding the endowment and the Northwoods parcel." Sterling's eyes narrowed slightly, surprised by her detailed knowledge. "Yes, the endowment is critically low. Elias, in his grandiosity, insisted on funding the Centennial Gala entirely from the school's reserves, a move I strongly opposed. Worse, he was planning to secretly sell the Northwoods, a conservation easement donated in the 1950s, to a cheap condo developer to fund his personal pet project, a Thorne-centric museum." Donovan picked up the thread. "When did you learn of the proposed land sale?" 2 days ago. He told me he was signing the preliminary agreement last night in the founder's study, right after the speeches. He threatened to frame me for financial malfeasance regarding the Gala expenditures if I went public with the land sale plans. The document he was clutching? I guarantee it was the deed or the preliminary contract. Sterling buried his face in his hands. "I had motive, Detective. He was going to ruin the school and my career. But I swear I never harmed him. I was talking to the development director downstairs the entire time he was upstairs." Penny confirmed the alibi, making a note to check the time logs on the security cameras near the development director's office, if they existed. Sterling's secret was out. He stood to lose everything, and Elias's death stopped the catastrophic land sale and prevented his financial ruin. Sterling had a powerful motive, but a plausible alibi, provided the development director corroborated his timeline precisely. As Sterling left, Fiona Shaw entered the room, radiating cool professionalism, a sharp contrast to the headmaster's frayed nerves. Her clothing and her demeanor were expensive, precise, and utterly unreadable. Penny realized the most dangerous secrets are the ones that are cloaked in competence. Donovan cut straight to the chase. "Ms. Shaw, you recently checked out a highly specific book on local poisons. Care to explain?" Fiona didn't flinch. She simply tilted her head, her expression of mild boredom. "Ah, yes, local botanicals. I was researching the origins of the school's seal, which features a sprig of hemlock. I wanted to ensure the school's historical documents accurately reflected whether the original Thorne family used the image as a symbol of regional pride or a warning. As CFO, I audit everything, including our legacy branding." She offered a small clinical smile. "Hardly a murder plot, Detective. I'm a finance expert, not a horticultural assassin." Penny felt a small flicker of disappointment. Fiona's explanation was neat, almost too neat, but technically plausible. However, when Penny asked about the status of the Northwoods parcel, Fiona's icy composure finally cracked. The Northwoods is complicated, Fiona admitted, her eyes suddenly shifting. Elias was attempting to maneuver the sale, yes, but I had prepared a contingency plan. I planned to stop him using legal means, proving the easement was non-revocable. His death simply expedited the protection of the land. As Fiona left, Penny replayed the interviews. Sterling admitted to financial chaos and career-ending threats. Fiona admitted to researching poisons and standing against Elias's final destructive move. Both had powerful motives, but only one had borrowed the book first. Penny couldn't shake the feeling that Fiona Shaw knew much more about the Bellwood endowment than she was letting on, and perhaps much more about Elias Thorne's death than she admitted. The cozy atmosphere was quickly giving way to the cold reality of greed and desperation.
Chapter 4. Detective Donovan spent the morning verifying Headmaster Sterling's alibi. The development director, Brenda Chen, confirmed Sterling had been with her continuously from 10:30 p.m. until the scream, reviewing donor lists in her private office, which was in the basement wing, the furthest point from the founder's study. Sterling was officially in the clear, but his admission of being financially threatened still made him a primary person of interest. He may not have been the killer, Dr. Carter, but he certainly wished Thorne dead, Donovan noted, tapping his pen against his notebook. Now, let's revisit Miss Shaw's story, the book. It's too convenient. Penny, meanwhile, was utilizing her archival access. She requested the minutes from the board meeting where Thorne IV had announced the land sale. The transcription confirmed Headmaster Sterling's outrage, but it also revealed a critical detail about Fiona Shaw. She showed Donovan the transcript. Look at this line. Elias is talking about the sale, and Fiona interrupts him. She doesn't argue about the ethics or the easement. She says, Elias, you can't sell that parcel. You don't legally own it anymore. But he dismisses her, calls it misinformation. Why would she say he didn't own the land? Donovan leaned closer, his brow furrowed. The Centennial document he was holding, the deed. If he didn't own the land, what was he doing signing a preliminary agreement? Penny had a theory. The founder's study has a hidden wall safe, built into the fireplace mantel. Thorne was obsessed with secrets. The original deed, the one from 1925, is a massive, ornate thing. I saw it cataloged briefly before the gala. Maybe the paper he was holding was a false deed, a prop he intended to use to fool the developer or even the board into thinking the sale was legitimate. They immediately went to the founder's study. The crime scene tape was still in place. Donovan located the wall safe hidden behind a painting of Elias Thorne III, and Penny was struck by the irony of a secret being hidden behind the image of a controlling patriarch. The safe was open. It was completely empty, except for a thin layer of dust and a small, antique skeleton key lying at the bottom. This changes everything, Donovan said, grimly. He wasn't murdered for the land he was selling, but for something he was protecting inside the safe. And the key? Penny carefully documented the key with her phone camera. That's a skeleton key. It could open any of the old original campus locks, like the herbarium, the clock tower, or the private vault in the CFO's office. If the school is in financial straits, as Sterling suggested, the killer may have been looking for the true financial records or evidence of Thorne's embezzlement. This put Fiona Shaw back at the top of the suspect list. She had researched poison, knew about the land ownership issues, and the skeleton key might point directly to a financial motive. Donovan agreed. I'll get a warrant to search Miss Shaw's office for any matching lock. In the meantime, Guinea,
Tell me more about Professor Vance. He was the second person to check out that poison book. What's his dark secret? Penny hesitated. She had observed Vance's agitated state at the gala. Julian Vance is the head of art history. He's notoriously passionate about Bellwood's archives. Elias Thorne recently mandated the sale of several rare, privately held, illuminated manuscripts to cover operational costs. He fought him tooth and nail. He saw it as defiling the soul of the Academy. He's also a volatile personality. He could easily have acted out of passion for the school's artistic heritage. Passion for art or passion for money? Donovan asked, his tone skeptical. Penny decided to check Vance's recent activities in the library log. Vance hadn't checked out any art books. His last checkout, prior to the botany text, was a book on the Thorne family lineage, 1900 to 1950. He was researching the Thorne family history, specifically a period just before Thorne IV's father took over. Perhaps the motive isn't the current financial crisis, but a stain on the Thorne family name that Elias was trying to keep buried before the Centennial. The empty safe suggested the killer wasn't just hiding a financial secret, but perhaps a secret of identity, legacy, or ownership that Thorne IV was determined to preserve or destroy. Thorne IV wasn't just a victim, he was a gatekeeper, and the contents of that safe, whatever they were the true treasure. And now, the true treasure was gone.
Chapter 5. Penny's interview with Professor Julian Vance the following afternoon was held in his cluttered art history office, a space that felt like a chaotic sanctuary, filled with plaster casts of ancient sculptures and stacks of precarious textbooks. Vance, usually flamboyant, was subdued, nursing a mug of tea, not oolong. "The poison book, Professor Vance," Penny began gently. "It was checked out by Miss Shaw, and then by you, a week later. Why the sudden interest in Hemlock and Nightshade?" Vance sighed dramatically, running a hand over his silver-streaked hair. "Ah, yes, Fiona, the Ice Queen of accounts. She's too pragmatic to commit murder, too fond of order. As for me, I've found her copy resting on the librarian's cart. I saw her notes. She was looking into the historical significance of the hemlock on the Thorne seal as a potential branding element." "And you?" Donovan pressed from his seat by the window. "I was intrigued by her hypothesis. I read the section she marked, a passage about the poisonous nature of certain New England flowers that thrive near old foundations. It's an interesting metaphor, wouldn't you agree? A beautiful, venerable institution built upon something toxic. I was incorporating it into a lecture on Gilded Age American symbolism. Elias Thorne was a walking, talking symbol of toxic entitlement." Penny noted the evasion. But why the Thorne family lineage book? Vance's face darkened, and his usual theatrical air dissipated, replaced by raw resentment. Because Thorne IV was a fraud. He claimed direct, unbroken lineage from the original founder, but the archives which he tried to control tell a different story. His father, Thorne III, only inherited the chairmanship because the true heir, the founder's granddaughter, mysteriously vanished in 1952. Elias used his name and his money to dictate policy, but his lineage was always murky. He gestured wildly to a small, framed black-and-white photograph on his desk. It showed 3 young people, 2 men and a woman, standing happily in front of the Bellwood gate in the early 1950s. One man was clearly a young Elias Thorne III. The other man had a striking resemblance to Vance. The woman was beautiful, with a cascade of dark hair. "That's my father, Peter Vance," Julian explained, his voice thick with emotion, pointing to the man who resembled him.
And that's Eleanor Higgins, the librarian, when she was a young woman working in the archives. He pointed to the third person, the woman. And that is Lila Thorne, the rightful heir to the school. My father and Lila were engaged, ready to take over the school together. But she disappeared just before the wedding. Thorne III inherited instead. My father always suspected Thorne III drove her away, or worse, so he could seize control. Penny felt a shiver run down her spine. The cozy mystery was suddenly reaching back 70 years. Did you discuss this with Elias Thorne IV recently? I showed him this picture at the Gala, just before his speech. I told him the Centennial was a lie built on a stolen inheritance. He laughed in my face, said my father was a paranoid fool, and Lila was just a flighty girl who ran off to Europe. But I knew that he was trying to sell the North Woods parcel to cover up the original Thorne family's financial misdeeds from the 1950s, misdeeds only Lila or her descendants could have uncovered. Julian Vance's motive wasn't money, or even just art. It was history, legacy, and a decades-old wrong committed against his family and the woman his father loved. He had confronted the victim moments before his death. As Penny and Donovan left Vance's office, Donovan got a discreet message. The warrant came through for Fiona Shaw's office, and there's something else. The DNA analysts found traces of oolong tea residue and faint traces of cyanide on the small antique skeleton key found in the empty safe. Someone handled the key after the poison was administered. The focus swung back to Fiona Shaw. Her official explanation for the poison book was plausible, but the key's connection to the poison suggested she might have handled the murder weapon, or at least the object the killer used to secure the key. We need to look into Fiona's movements the night of the murder and her relationship with Elias outside of the boardroom. She's the CFO. If the safe held evidence of 70 years of financial crimes, she would know exactly what to look for and how to dispose of it. And she'd know the skeleton key might unlock the evidence. Suddenly, the sweet, nervous, and now grieving Mrs. Higgins, the librarian, came back into sharp focus. She was in that old photograph with Vance's father. She was Lila Thorne's best friend. She was the gatekeeper of the founder's study ritual, and she was the last person to see the teacup before Elias drank from it. Penny knew they needed to talk to Mrs. Higgins again, not about the tea, but about Lila Thorne, the missing heir, and the secrets buried deep within the Bellwood archives.
Chapter 6. The archive office, the domain of Mrs. Eleanor Higgins, was a warm, quiet haven filled with the comforting smell of old paper and leather bindings. The petite librarian, having recovered from her shock, was back in her element, looking fragile but surprisingly composed. Penny decided to approach the interview with empathy, leveraging her own role as an archivist. Donovan observed silently. "Mrs. Higgins," Penny began softly, sitting beside her at a large, worn table. "Detective Donovan and I need to talk about the 1950s, about Lila Thorne." Eleanor flinched visibly at the name, her hands, resting on a stack of index cards, trembling slightly. "Lila. My dear friend. She was the heart of this academy, Penny. Kind, brilliant, the true successor to her grandfather. Julian Vance showed us a photograph of you, his father, and Lila. He believes Elias Thorne III, the father of the victim, was involved in her disappearance to secure his inheritance." Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. Elias III was ruthless. He wanted control, and Lila was in the way. He spread rumors she was unstable, that she had drained the family accounts and run away. My Peter, Julian's father, and I tried to track her, but the money trail went cold. Thorne III fabricated a new will and took over. She paused, lowering her voice to a whisper. Elias IV, the one who was murdered,
was just as bad. He kept that secret buried, rewriting the official history for the Centennial. Donovan, sensing the opportunity, asked, "You prepared the tea that killed him. Did you also see the skeleton key, Mrs. Higgins?" Eleanor looked genuinely confused. "A key?" "No, Detective. I only saw the small, silver teapot. I made the tea, the oolong, and put the pot in an empty cup on the hall table, just outside the study door, as he instructed. I left immediately to find my reading glasses." "Who else had access to that second-floor hallway?" Penny asked. "Anyone from the Gala, in theory, but it was remote. Only someone who knew Elias's precise ritual would know the tea was waiting there to be poisoned. And the kitchen stuff, of course, but they wouldn't know about the key." Eleanor suddenly stopped, her eyes lighting up with a memory. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, flat box containing a single, faded envelope. "After Elias IV made his speech, he came straight up here," Eleanor explained, her voice firmer. "I was organizing a Centennial display of correspondence near the study door, waiting for him to finish his pompous address. He walked right past me, but then he turned around, looked straight at me, and said something strange. He said, 'Eleanor, tell Julian Vance that the original sin is forgiven, but the original debt must be paid.' Then he tapped his pocket and walked into the study." "What did he tap?" Penny asked, leaning closer. "His inner jacket pocket. I assumed it was his wallet, but now, maybe it was the key or the note. It was a very old, heavy fabric, that key." Penny and Donovan exchanged glances. Elias IV was not murdered immediately upon entering the study. He was murdered after someone entered and served him the poisoned tea. Why would he utter a cryptic message to the librarian right before his death? Eleanor then handed Penny the faded envelope. "This is what I was organizing. I was going to put it back after the Centennial. It's an original, uncatalogued letter from Elias Thorne to my father, Peter Vance, dated 2 weeks before she disappeared in 1952. The letter was written in elegant, looping script. "My dearest Peter, I've discovered the truth. It isn't just a matter of Elias III's ambition. The original Bellwood Foundation was built on a terrible omission in the deed of 1925, and Elias III has found a way to exploit it. He is planning to drain the Northwood Trust, and I fear he intends to use the very papers I entrusted to him to do it. The only way to stop him is to retrieve the second seal he hides. I've made a copy of the evidence and hidden it where only you or Eleanor would think to look, in the place where words and stone meet. I must leave tonight, but I will return with the leverage I need. Tell Eleanor I am sorry I couldn't say goodbye. End." The implication was staggering. The original founder's deed had a terrible omission, which Elias Thorne IV was likely exploiting to sell the North Woods. The document he was clutching wasn't the false sale agreement. It was the original 1925 deed he had retrieved from the safe, a document that proved his fraud or gave him authority. And the empty safe? It must have contained the second seal or the copy of the evidence Leela mentioned. The murderer had taken the evidence that exposed the entire Thorne legacy. The key was likely for the safe, Penny realized, her voice hushed. Elias IV put the key in his pocket after opening the safe and retrieving the original deed, but he was holding the deed in his hand when he died. The killer must have seen him open the safe, poisoned the tea, and then after he collapsed, took the evidence, the second seal and the copy of the evidence, but dropped the key, which was now tainted with the poison residue from their hands or gloves. Donovan looked at the letter, then at the gentle librarian. "Mrs. Higgins, do you have any idea what 'where words and stone meet' means?" Eleanor shook her head, tears now falling freely. "No. but I believe Leela was murdered that night in 1952, not run away. And Elias Thorne knew the truth. Whoever murdered him last night was looking for the same thing Leela was trying to protect. The librarian's quiet grief masked a powerful, decades-long connection to the motive. They had confirmed that the motive was not just the current financial crisis, but a 70-year-old sin. Penny had to find the second seal.
Chapter 7. Armed with Elias Thorne's letter and the phrase, "where words and stone meet," Penny and Donovan focused their attention on the most likely candidate for such an obscure phrase, Professor Julian Vance, the art history expert obsessed with the school's artistic architecture and legacy. They found Vance teaching a class on Byzantine mosaic work. Penny approached him during a break. "Professor, we have reason to believe that Elias Thorne hid crucial evidence about the original Bellwood deed in 1952. She described the location as where words and stone meet. Does that mean anything to you?" Vance's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock replacing his usual theatricality. "Lila? Hiding something? Of course, it's the cenotaph." He pulled up a digital photograph of a large, austere stone monument situated in a small, seldom-visited garden near the faculty library. It was a memorial, a large block of marble etched with the Bellwood crest and the names of the Academy's war dead and notable alumni. The cenotaph was installed in 1951, just before Lila disappeared, Vance explained excitedly, pointing to the image. "Look closely at the base. The crest is surrounded by an inscription, Virtuos et sapientia fundamentum. Virtue and wisdom are the foundation. That's the words, and the base of the monument is hollow. It was originally designed to hold a time capsule that was never installed. Stone, meet, words. It's a perfect hiding spot for the copy of the evidence or the second seal." Penny's heart pounded. This was the intersection of history and crime she craved. Could Elias Thorne IV have known about this hiding spot? "No," Vance asserted confidently. "He was interested only in the financial ledgers. This is personal historic knowledge. It's the kind of knowledge only my father, Eleanor, or perhaps a master stonemason would have possessed. And the killer must have taken the original document from the safe, confirming Elias was about to use it." Donovan immediately dispatched officers to secure the cenotaph site. The tension in the school was palpable now. Everyone knew the police were circling, closing in on a secret far older than the Centennial itself. While waiting for the confirmation from the cenotaph, Donovan turned his attention back to Fiona Shaw, the CFO. "Dr. Carter, I can't shake the financial motive. Elias Thorne IV was a controlling monster. Fiona had the means, she studied the poison, and she was the only one who knew about the true ownership of the North Woods, a direct threat to the financial stability of the school she manages. She could have killed him to protect the endowment." Penny considered this. "I agree. But the key to the safe was likely dropped by the killer after they took the contents. Why did Fiona check out the poison book first? She said she was researching the hemlock on the seal, but what if she was creating a distraction for her real reason for needing a poison?" Just then, a confirmation text came through to Donovan. The officers had managed to carefully pry open the base of the cenotaph. Inside, wrapped in oilskin, they found a small, leather-bound box. Inside the box was a wax seal, the second seal, clearly the original founder's signature mark, and a notarized letter dated 1952. The letter was from the original founder's lawyer. It stated that the founder, concerned about the potential future greed of his heirs, had secretly sold the North Woods parcel to the Bellwood Foundation itself in 1928 for the sum of $1, with the stipulation that the funds generated from that land would go to the Bellwood Staff Pension Fund. Elias Thorne III had discovered the existence of this document and kept it hidden, allowing the land to remain on the Thorne family's books as an asset, while slowly draining the pension fund. Elias Thorne IV was doing the same. Selling the land was effectively draining the staff's retirement savings to fund his vanity projects. "My God," Penny breathed, reading the details. The North Woods wasn't just an easement, it was the foundation of the staff's retirement.
Elias F. wasn't just threatening the school, he was stealing the faculty's life savings. That gives every single staff member the ultimate motive: financial survival. The list of suspects, Sterling, Vance, Shaw, even Eleanor Higgins, suddenly grew much longer. Any faculty member who was close to retirement, who had invested decades into Bellwood, was now a potential killer. And the person who knew the most about the pension fund's health and its looming collapse? Fiona Shaw, the CFO. She wasn't just protecting the endowment, she was protecting the financial futures of everyone in that room. The motive was massive, and the evidence, the key with poison residue, was pointing directly at her.
Chapter 8. Detective Donovan immediately secured a formal interview with Fiona Shaw. Her cool exterior was finally showing signs of strain. The news of the cenotaph discovery and the explosive details of the Bellwood Staff Pension Fund had clearly rattled her. Ms. Shaw, the cenotaph document confirms that the Northwoods parcel was secretly designated to fund the Bellwood Staff Pension Fund, Donovan stated flatly. Elias Thorne IV was planning to sell that land, which would have ruined the retirement of every long-serving staff member. As CFO, you knew this. We also have evidence that the skeleton key found at the scene, which likely unlocked the evidence, contained traces of cyanide. Fiona leaned back in her chair, her eyes briefly closing in resignation. I knew the pension fund was hollow. Elias III had been slowly liquidating the assets for decades, and Elias IV was about to finish the job. The staff's future was in jeopardy. I checked out the botany book, yes, but not to plan a murder. Then why? Penny asked, her voice calm. Fiona met Penny's gaze. Because I was planning to poison myself, not Elias. The shame and responsibility of the collapse of the fund, I couldn't face the faculty. I was going to expose Elias publicly, leave the proof in the safe, and then end it. I checked the book for a quick, untraceable method, but I couldn't go through with it. I put the book back, determined to fight Elias legally. This confession, so quiet and dark, was chilling. It proved her access to the poison knowledge, but it also offered a plausible explanation for her morbid research that cleared her of the murder itself. Donovan considered this. If you put the book back and you didn't kill him, why were you looking into the Thorne family lineage? I wasn't, Fiona said, shaking her head. That was Professor Vance. I told you I'm a numbers person. I only care about the balance sheet. But you were the first to check out the poison book, and Vance checked it out a week later. No, Penny corrected, checking her notes. The library system shows it was checked out on Tuesday afternoon. Did you leave it somewhere other than the return slot? Fiona closed her eyes again, thinking hard. Yes, I left it on the return cart in the hall outside the archive office before the gala rehearsal started that Tuesday morning. I saw Sarah Jenkins, the head of admissions, browsing the cart just before I left the wing. Sarah Jenkins, the head of admissions, the one who first noted Headmaster Sterling's distress, the woman who seemed perpetually stressed. Sarah had worked at Bellwood for nearly 20 years. She was close to retirement. Her entire future was tied up in that pension fund. Donovan contacted the officer guarding Sarah at her home, requesting she be brought in immediately. While they waited, Penny returned to the cenotaph. The second seal was confirmed to be the official founder seal, used in 1928 to finalize the sale of the Northwoods to the pension fund. It was the absolute proof of Thorne IV's fraud. The killer had been in the study looking for this seal or Lila's evidence, which was in the empty safe. Elias IV had the original deed, but the killer needed the proof of the fraud to secure the land for the staff. The true breakthrough came when Penny analyzed the security camera footage from the Gala night. They had one grainy, intermittent camera focused on the back staircase, a seldom-used service route. The video showed a figure ascending the stairs at 10:45 p.m., shortly after Thorne went to the study, and descending at 10:55 p.m. The figure was cloaked in a large, dark shawl, making identification impossible. However, the camera caught a clear detail.
The figure was carrying a distinctive, slightly oversized handbag that looked exactly like the one Sarah Jenkins carried daily. The timeline was perfect. Sarah was at the gala, slipped away for 10 minutes while Thorne was upstairs, administered the poison, and returned to the party just before the scream. The cozy mystery had narrowed down to the quietest, most seemingly harmless suspect of all.
Chapter 9. Sarah Jenkins, the head of admissions, was brought in for questioning. She was tearful, distraught, and maintained her innocence. She was too gentle, too involved in the lives of Bellwood students to be a murderer. Penny couldn't reconcile the image of the kind head of admissions with the cold, calculating use of cyanide. Donovan was direct. "Ms. Jenkins, we have video footage of a figure matching your profile using the service stairs near the founder's study between 10:45 and 10:55 p.m. the night of the murder. You were at the gala. You had a direct financial motive to stop Elias Thorne IV from selling the Northwoods parcel and collapsing the staff pension fund. Did you go upstairs that night?" Sarah broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. "Yes, I went upstairs, but not for the reason you think. I wasn't going to kill him. I was going to beg him." She explained that she had been counting on her pension to help her daughter afford college. When Headmaster Sterling had subtly warned her the fund was in trouble, she felt desperate. "I saw him go up and I followed him. I had to appeal to his better nature, to his sense of legacy. I carried a special handwritten letter from my daughter, detailing her college dreams, hoping to move him." "Did you enter the founder's study?" Penny asked gently. "No," she insisted. "I saw Mrs. Higgins leave the tea tray outside the door. I waited in the small alcove. I heard him on the phone, laughing, a cruel, dismissive sound. He was telling someone he didn't care about the staff, that they were lucky to have a job at all. I lost my nerve. I left the letter on the tea tray, hoping he'd read it, and then I went straight back downstairs. I never saw him, and I certainly never poisoned his tea." Her story was emotionally compelling, but it was self-serving. It placed her at the scene with the strongest motive and contradicted Mrs. Higgins's testimony about leaving the area clear. Donovan looked unconvinced. "Ms. Jenkins, if you left a letter on the tea tray and someone entered the founder's study to serve the tea, they would have seen your letter. Was it there when Mrs. Higgins returned?" "I don't know," she wept, "but I swear I didn't serve the tea." Penny's mind was racing. If Sarah was telling the truth, someone else must have seen the letter, removed it, and then served the poisoned tea. The figure on the tape, cloaked in the shawl, could still have been Sarah, but if she was innocent, the real killer was covering their tracks by using her desperation as a decoy. Penny remembered a tiny, almost insignificant detail from the crime scene photos. Elias Thorne IV wasn't just clutching the deed, he was wearing a lapel pin, the Centennial edition of the Bellwood crest, a gold pin shaped like a small hemlock sprig. But in the photo, the pin was slightly crooked, almost as if it had been dislodged by a brief, close-range scuffle or a struggle near his chest. Penny asked a seemingly unrelated question. "Sarah, did you touch Elias Thorne IV when you went upstairs?" "No, I never even entered the room. And you didn't touch the tea tray?" "No." Donovan, seeing Penny's focus shift, leaned back. "What are you thinking, Dr. Carter?" "I'm thinking about the method of delivery," Penny mused. "The poison was in the tea. If the figure on the tape, the killer, was Sarah, she took the poisoned cup into the room, served it, waited for him to drink, and left. If she's innocent, the killer was not the figure on the tape, but someone else who simply walked into the study, added the poison to the waiting cup, and ensured Thorne drink it." Penny then remembered another small detail from the crime scene. She focused on the crooked lapel pin. "Detective, I need to know the state of Elias Thorne's lapel pin when the body was discovered. Was it secured, or was it slightly dislodged?" The officer on scene confirmed the detail. "It was slightly loose, Dr. Carter. We noted it in the evidence log.
looked like it had been snagged by something, maybe a loose thread or a piece of jewelry. Penny turned to Sarah. "Ms. Jenkins, did you wear a brooch or any distinguishing jewelry that night? Something that might catch on a lapel?" Sarah shook her head. "No, nothing like that. Just my simple silver necklace." The simple question seemed to clear Sarah. She didn't have a brooch, but someone in that room, someone who came close enough to bump his chest or remove the second seal from his pocket, might have. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place for Penny. The killer wasn't the most obvious suspect with the biggest motive. The killer was the person who had access to the poison, knew the tea ritual, knew that the safe, and, crucially, had an alibi that put them far away from the crime scene, but close enough to the poison's source. The killer was the person who was closest to the poison tea from the very beginning, someone who had time to prepare the dose before the evening started, and then let someone else take the fall.
Chapter 10. Penny's suspicion had now crystallized around an unlikely figure. Silas Croft, the taciturn, elderly groundskeeper. He had been quietly working at Bellwood for 40 years, tending to the historic gardens and the school's small, century-old herbarium, the most logical source of the cyanide, likely stored as a historical specimen. Donovan initially dismissed the idea. The groundskeeper? He's barely visible, Penny. He was seen clearing leaves near the chapel all evening. No motive, no access to the board's inner workings. But he has access to the poison source, Penny countered fiercely. Cyanide, or a compound that metabolizes into it, can be extracted from specific historical plants found in the Bellwood herbarium. Silas is the only one who maintains that collection, and he had a personal, almost proprietary relationship with the North Woods. They found Silas in the greenhouse, trimming a flowering camellia, his rough, weathered hands moving with surprising delicacy. He looked up, his expression one of stoic weariness. "Silas," Donovan began, his voice surprisingly gentle, "we need to talk about the herbarium. Did anyone, Headmaster Sterling, Fiona Shaw, or even Mrs. Higgins, request access to your collection of historical plants or chemicals in the last month?" Silas paused, slowly placing his shears down. "No, sir. No one ever asks about the herbarium, except for the young Dr. Carter, of course, when she first cataloged the archive." Penny stepped in. "Silas, the poison that killed Elias Thorne IV came from a natural source, a compound likely stored in your collection. Can you confirm its presence?" Silas looked down, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Yes, I have a sample of Prunus laurocerosus, cherry laurel, one of the oldest species in the collection. It contains high levels of cyanide compounds. It's locked in the furthest cabinet. Only I have the key." "Did you give that key to anyone?" Donovan pressed. Silas slowly shook his head. "No, but I did see Mrs. Higgins in the greenhouse that Tuesday morning, the day after the gala rehearsal. She was looking for a special container for her oolong tea. She said she needed a clean, special container for the annual ritual." The revelation struck Penny with the force of a physical blow. Mrs. Higgins hadn't been looking for a generic container. She was in the one place where she could have accessed the cyanide without Silas's knowledge, perhaps using her archival keys to access the cabinet when Silas was outside. "Mrs. Higgins' motive is the deepest of all," Penny declared, turning to Donovan. "She believes Elias Thorne III, the father of the victim, murdered her best friend, Leela Thorne, to steal the Bellwood inheritance in 1952. She knew the original deed was a lie, and she knew the North Woods was the Staff Pension Fund's foundation. Elias Thorne IV was simply a continuation of the family lie. She had decades of simmering vengeance, and she was the only one who handled the tea preparation." They returned to Mrs. Higgins's office. She was quietly cataloging a shelf of ancient leather-bound books, the embodiment of a cozy, scholarly life.
Donovan approached her desk. "Mrs. Higgins, we know you were looking for a special tea container in the greenhouse on Tuesday morning, the only place where the cyanide source was kept. We know you are the only one who handled the oolong tea preparation for Elias Thorne IV's ritual. And we know you hated Elias and his family for what they did to your friend Leela Thorne." Mrs. Higgins slowly put down her book, her eyes now clear and dangerously calm. "I didn't kill Elias IV, Detective, but I wish I had. My motives were strong, my access was perfect, and my alibi, that I left the tea outside the door, was designed to make me look like a distraction, but it was a lie of omission, not a lie of commission." "What are you admitting?" Penny whispered, leaning forward. Eleanor reached into her own jacket pocket and pulled out the missing Centennial lapel pin, the gold hemlock sprig that had been slightly dislodged on Elias's tuxedo. "I didn't kill him, Dr. Carter, but I know who did. When I went up to his study, I was worried about him retrieving the deed. I knocked, and he told me to leave the tea outside the door. I did, but I waited in the hall. 5 minutes later, Headmaster Sterling came rushing up the stairs." Eleanor's voice dropped. Sterling had the worst motive of all. He wasn't just saving the pension fund. He was saving the entire Academy's reputation from the scandal of the stolen pension. He was carrying a small vial. He went in. I heard a sharp intake of breath, and then silence. He came out, rushing, and his lapel brushed mine as he ran past. I found his Academy pin lodged in my wool coat a few minutes later. The pieces snapped together. Headmaster Sterling had the strong alibi from the development director, who was miles away. But the killer didn't need a strong alibi. They needed a brief window of opportunity. The development director's office was in the basement wing. Sterling had left her for a brief period. His motive, saving the school's legacy, was the most powerful of all. He could have used his authority to get the cyanide from Silas earlier in the week, claiming it was for a historical preservation project. "Where is the pin from Headmaster Sterling's coat, Mrs. Higgins?" Donovan asked, his voice sharp with urgency. Eleanor pointed to the pin in her hand. "This is the one I found snagged in my coat. I knew it was the only evidence that placed him at the scene when he claimed to be elsewhere. And the letter from Sarah Jenkins? Sterling took it off the tea tray to ensure that Thorne never read it, ensuring his desperate plea wouldn't interfere with the plan to save Bellwood. The librarian, the seemingly sweetest and most harmless person, had orchestrated a perfect, chilling misdirection that was almost successful. She didn't commit the murder, but she ensured the right person took the fall, and the real killer was revealed.
The revelation that Headmaster Alistair Sterling was the true killer and that Mrs. Higgins had been shielding him while orchestrating an elaborate game of hot potato with the evidence was the cozy twist Penny had hoped for. The kindest, most respected figure in the school, driven to murder out of a sense of institutional noblesse oblige. Donovan immediately dispatched officers to locate Sterling. He was found, not fleeing, but meticulously packing the contents of his office, his movements slow and deliberate, the picture of weary defeat. Before Sterling was formally questioned, Penny reviewed the entire chain of events again, identifying the crucial missed link. Sterling's alibi with the development director, Brenda Chin, was the key, Penny explained to Donovan. The meeting was in the basement wing, far from the founder's study. He said they were reviewing donor lists, but the murder occurred within a narrow 15-minute window. He couldn't have made the round trip, committed the murder, and returned without suspicion. Unless, Donovan countered, the development director's office had another exit or a private staircase that only Sterling knew about. Penny pulled up the original architectural blueprints of Bellwood. They were complex, reflecting decades of additions. She pointed to a section near Brenda Chin's office, marked with a faint dashed line, Service Dumbwaiter, Founders Era.
The original building had a service dumbwaiter, meant for moving large, heavy books or files between the ground floor and the founder's study. It's been decommissioned and covered up, but the access panel in the development director's office might have been quietly restored or made accessible by someone who needed to bypass the main stairwell entirely. They found the headmaster sitting calmly at his desk, awaiting them. Sterling, tall and weary, offered them tea. They declined. Donovan placed the gold hemlock pin on the desk. "Alistair, this pin was found on Mrs. Higgins' coat. It's your official academy pin, and she says it's snagged on her coat as you rushed past her on the second floor, shortly after Elias Thorne IV collapsed in the founder's study." Sterling looked at the pin, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Ah, yes, I had forgotten I misplaced it. A silly, sentimental thing." And the service dumbwaiter in Miss Chin's office provides a direct, unseen route to the second floor hall, bypassing all security cameras and cutting the travel time from 20 minutes to 2, Penny added, her voice firm. Sterling sighed, leaning back and resting his head on his hands. He didn't deny it. "I did it, Detective, but not for myself. It was for Bellwood. I know you found the cenotaph document. You know Elias IV was about to sign away the staff's future. It wasn't just the pension. The scandal would have ruined Bellwood's reputation beyond repair. The Centennial would have been the Foundation's death knell." He confessed to everything. He had used his authority to get the cyanide from Silas Croft under the pretext of needing it for a historical preservation project. He prepared the fatal dose in a small vial days beforehand. When Elias Thorne went upstairs, Sterling excused himself from Brendichin's office, used the hidden dumbwaiter, and slipped into the hall. He saw Sarah Jenkins' desperate letter on the tray and removed it, knowing it would be a decoy. He added the poison to the tea, entered the study, and convinced Thorne, who was distracted and slightly intoxicated, to drink it before he signed the deed. Then he retrieved the document he needed, the second seal, from the open safe, ensuring the pension fund was protected. He ran back downstairs via the dumbwaiter, returning to Brendichin's office just minutes before the scream. His crime was one of institutional loyalty, not personal greed, the perfect hallmark of a cozy mystery villain driven by a warped sense of honor.
Chapter 12. Headmaster Sterling's confession was meticulously detailed, delivered in the calm, measured tone of a professor lecturing on ancient philosophy. The moment I saw the second seal and the lawyer's note in the safe, I knew there was no choice, Sterling stated, his eyes fixed on a point far above Penny and Donovan's heads. Elias was determined to sign the fraudulent sale agreement. I had to prevent him from destroying the staff's financial stability. Bellwood is not just buildings. It's the people who dedicate their lives here. I had to protect them. "When did you plan this?" Penny asked, tracing the outline of the pin on the desk. 2 days before the gala. Elias was arrogant enough to tell me he was going to sign the papers immediately after his speech, and he was too drunk on his own ego to suspect any resistance. I got the Prunus lariceris from Silas Croft, claiming it was for a new archive pest control measure. I extracted the compound. I knew Mrs. Higgins would prepare the oolong, and Elias's ritual of asking for the tray to be left outside the door provided the perfect brief window of opportunity. "And you used the dumbwaiter because you knew the main stairs were covered by the one intermittent camera," Donovan noted. "Precisely. That dumbwaiter was decommissioned after a student prank in the 1970s. I had the access panel in Ms. Chen's office discreetly unlocked months ago, claiming I needed to inspect the original foundation integrity. I was planning to use it to move sensitive papers, but it became my means of access to the founder's study that night." Penny pondered Sterling's explanation. It seemed perfectly logical and fit with the meager data that she had available.
In a cozy mystery, the solution often involves two characters, the killer and the accomplice who either planned it or enabled it. Alistair, you said you got the cyanide from Silas Croft 2 days before the gala, and Fiona Shaw checked out the poison book a week before the gala. Did Fiona know about your plans? Sterling's expression remained placid. Fiona only knew I was going to stop Elias, not how. She was determined to use a legal injunction. She was too ethical for murder. But she checked out the poison book first, Penny insisted, and Mrs. Higgins lied about her movements in the hall, clearly trying to protect someone she knew. Eleanor didn't lie, she just chose not to report my fleeting presence in the hall. She knew I was trying to save the school, and she sympathized with my desperation. The old guard protects its own, Penny, and Fiona was simply doing historical research, I'm sure. But Penny remembered Fiona's confession. She was planning to kill herself. She was protecting the pension fund, which she was the financial steward of. If the pension fund failed, she would be ruined. And who would be the first to know about the failure? The CFO. Alistair, you said Elias IV threatened to ruin you financially, but Fiona Shaw was the one in the hot seat. She confessed to us that she was contemplating suicide because the pension collapse was imminent. Did you kill him not just to save Bellwood, but to save Fiona Shaw, whom you are deeply in love with? Sterling's composure shattered. His eyes swam with tears, his voice cracking. She was going to kill herself, Penny. She was so ashamed of the financial disaster that Elias III and IV had created. I couldn't save the pension fund fast enough to prevent her exposure. I had to eliminate the source of the pressure and ensure the evidence that proved her innocence was secured. The true, cozy, hidden motive was revealed: love and protection. The headmaster murdered the chairman to save the woman he loved from professional and personal ruin.
Chapter 13. Headmaster Sterling was arrested and led away quietly. The whole affair was handled with a professional discretion that only an elite prep school and a small-town detective could manage, ensuring the narrative released to the press was one of a tragic business dispute. The second seal and the proof of Thorne family financial malfeasance were secured, and the North Woods parcel was officially registered to the Bellwood Staff Pension Fund, stabilizing the institution's future. Alistair Sterling, the killer, was also the school's savior. Despite the confession, Penny was still troubled. The mystery had been solved, but the narrative felt slightly incomplete. She met Detective Donovan for coffee the next morning at the Hemlock Falls Diner, a charming spot known for its fresh cinnamon rolls. He confessed he had the means, the motive, and the alibi-breaking pin, Donovan summarized, stirring his coffee. It's closed, Penny. You solved it. I know, but the sequence still bothers me. Why did Mrs. Higgins lie about her movements? She said she left the tea on the hall table. Sterling says he used the dumbwaiter and added the poison in the study hall. But Eleanor confessed she saw him run past her. Why did she wait until the very end to reveal that? Donovan shrugged. Loyalty. She hated Thorne, loved Sterling, and didn't want to hand him over until she was sure the second seal was safe and the school was protected. She protected Bellwood too. Penny took a sip of her coffee, her eyes narrowed in thought. But what if she didn't just lie by omission? What if she was the co-conspirator? How? She knew the tea ritual better than anyone. She prepared the oolong. She was the one who went to the greenhouse and asked Silas for a special container. What if she didn't just ask for a container, but subtly directed him to the cyanide source? What if she prepared the delivery mechanism, the poisoned tea bag or a sugar cube, before the gala even started, and only pretended to leave the tea outside the door?
Penny laid out her final theory. Preparation. Mrs. Higgins, motive, vengeance for Lila Thorne, protection of the school, prepared the poisoned oolong tea bag or sugar cube and placed it inside the antique teapot or a waiting cup. Access. She brought the poisoned tea to the second floor, as planned. The switch. She then made contact with Headmaster Sterling. Motive, love for Fiona Shaw, protection of the school. Sterling, having just retrieved the second seal from the safe, was distraught and ready to act. She simply told him, "The tea is ready, Alistair. Go save Bellwood." Sterling, knowing the tea was already poisoned, simply entered the study, spoke briefly with Thorne, and ensured he drank the poisoned cup. His role was the delivery and the retrieval of the evidence, the second seal. The cover-up. Eleanor then used her fabricated story of leaving the tea outside the door to make herself an immediate suspect, but one with a weak alibi, distracting the police while Sterling's alibi held strong in the basement. So Sterling was the killer, but Eleanor, Higgins, was the facilitator. She provided the means and the opportunity, ensuring that her rival, the Thorne family, was finally extinguished, while protecting the man she respected, and possibly the woman she cared about, Fiona Shaw, from financial ruin. Donovan leaned back, a rare, genuine smile appearing on his face. A conspiracy of honor and revenge. A perfect Bellwood plot. But Penny, we have a clear, signed confession. Sterling is going to jail, and the school is safe. I know, but a good mystery writer always knows the difference between the legal solution and the narrative truth. The narrative truth is that the history of Bellwood Academy finally claimed its victim 73 years after the original sin.
The days following Headmaster Sterling's arrest brought an anticlimactic quiet to Bellwood. Fiona Shaw, devastated but relieved, took over as interim head of administration, her primary task being the full legal registration of the Northwoods parcel to the staff pension fund. She had been saved, both financially and emotionally, by Sterling's desperate act of love. Julian Vance, the art history professor, began planning a new exhibit focused on the true history of the Thorne family, centering on Lila Thorne's bravery and the documents she hid. And Mrs. Higgins, the quiet puppet master, returned to her archival duties, now watching over the school's secrets with a satisfied, almost serene calm. Her small act of withholding information had secured the school's future and brought a decades-old injustice to light. Penny, now a minor celebrity on campus, was finally able to return to her original passion, the Bellwood archives. She was reviewing the founder's original correspondence, still searching for any connection to a second seal, even though the official mystery was solved. She found a small, handwritten marginalia in the founder's 1925 journal, beneath a section discussing the school's long-term financial stability. I must ensure that the great lie I have allowed to persist is eventually exposed, lest my descendants mistake pride for virtue. There is always a second seal upon a document, the true purpose written in the stone beneath the words. The true purpose written in the stone beneath the words. The second seal wasn't just a physical stamp, it was a principle, the hidden, foundational contract that underpinned the school's existence. Penny realized her role at Bellwood was just beginning. The academy was a living, breathing history book, and she was the only one with the key to its secrets. 6 weeks later, Bellwood Academy held a quiet, informal ceremony to officially dedicate the Northwoods parcel to the Bellwood Staff Pension Fund. The weather in Hemlock Falls was crisp and golden, the very essence of a cozy New England autumn. Penny stood near the newly dedicated plaque, chatting with Fiona Shaw. Alistair is doing as well as he can, considering, Fiona admitted, her voice low. He sees it as a necessary sacrifice. He saved us all, Penny, and he finally admitted what I always suspected. He knew about the pension fund's imminent collapse and couldn't bear the thought of me facing that failure. It was a crime of immense, misguided love, a fitting end to a story built on generational secrets. Detective Donovan approached, carrying 2 mugs of coffee from the Hemlock Falls diner. Alistair Sterling is stable. The press has moved on to the next scandal, and the staff pension is secure. The town owes you a debt of gratitude, Dr. Carter. I was just the archivist who connected the dots, Detective, Penny said, smiling. Mrs. Higgins and the headmaster provided all the drama. Speaking of dots, Donovan said, handing her a mug, his eyes twinkling in the afternoon sun. That figure in the shawl going up the service stairs, you couldn't tell if it was Sarah Jenkins or not, right? Impossible to confirm, Penny said, sipping the warm coffee. But I noticed something else. The time Mrs. Higgins said she was looking for her reading glasses just before the murder, I checked the library security footage from the main floor. Penny leaned in, her heart racing again. What did you see? She wasn't looking for glasses. She was standing perfectly still in the shadow of a large bookcase, looking directly at the service staircase access door in the basement wing. She was waiting for Sterling to return. She was making sure her co-conspirator was safe before she sounded the alarm. Penny smiled, a deep satisfaction settling over her. A true guardian of the narrative, Eleanor Higgins, she didn't just know the ending, she wrote the final, necessary chapter. Donovan smiled back. Well, if you ever decide to pursue something other than dusty old books, there's always a place for a keen observer in Hemlock Falls. Maybe we could discuss it over a proper dinner, not just coffee and crime scenes. I'd like that very much, Detective, Penny replied, feeling the charm and the intrigue of Hemlock Falls wrap around her like a warm, familiar blanket. The secrets of Bellwood Academy were finally locked away, but the possibilities for new mysteries and new beginnings were just opening up. The first century of Bellwood ended with murder, but the next had begun with a promise of truth. And that brings us to the end of Murder at Bellwood Academy. I hope you enjoyed unraveling the century-old secrets of the Thorne family and solving the puzzle right alongside Dr. Penny Carter and Detective Donovan. Now that you know the killer, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment. Tell me in the comments below, what was your favorite clue? And did you guess that the headmaster, Alistair Sterling, would be the one hiding the truth? Subscribe for more. If you loved this deep dive into the world of cozy Gothic mystery, hit that subscribe button right now. I have more full-length detective stories just like this one coming every day. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you're the first to know when they drop. Ready for your next puzzle? Click the video on your screen right now to jump into our next mystery